Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What if I told you there is an investment that will make the GDP per capita go from this to this, where the GDP per capita has substantially increased, and that this investment will result in a savings of $1.62 trillion in healthcare, and a savings of over $1 trillion in agricultural production costs, and a savings of over $530 billion in land management, and that it'll double the income of 545 million small-scale farmers, all the while keeping greenhouse gas emissions for agriculture below the Paris Agreement commitment. But that passing on this investment would cost us, the global community, 5% of the global GDP, which is the equivalent of $3.5 trillion a year, or $500 per person. This investment also creates opportunities and will result in more resilient supply chains, more stable economies and currencies, and more talented human capital, and opportunities to invest in frontier markets. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm calling out to you today to make an investment today that stabilizes tomorrow and ensures that you can be the drivers of the opportunities of the future. This investment is in food security, which means it's also an investment in women, children, education, social protection, and rural infrastructure. And remember the graph we showed you. The simulation was based on an increase of dietary energy supplies, or what we would call calories. So what I'm presenting to you today is an opportunity to invest in an organization that was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2020. This organization, which recently rehabilitated over 1.5 million hectares of land and provided over $2.1 billion in cash transfers for social protections last year, and which supports over 100 million people a year with life-saving and life-changing assistance, which is including over 50% of this number are women and children. Let's take a look more closely. This year, 30 million people need just 45 cents for one meal a day. What does this mean? It means $5 billion is needed this year to prevent 30 million people from famine. And what I'm proposing to you today is if you sow the seed fund today, then you can reap the crop in nutritionally, economically, and politically stable countries in the future. And if you'd like to know more and be a part of this journey, I implore you to get in touch with the World Food Program right here today. And with that, allow me to introduce you to the Executive Director of the World Food Program, David Beasley.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, in 1970, Dr. Norman Borlaug, known as the father of the Green Revolution, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And at that time he said, man can and must prevent the tragedy of famine in the future, instead of merely trying with pious regret to salvage the human wreckage of the famine as he has so often done in the past. My question to you is, in those 50 years, how much have we learned and how much have we accomplished to fulfill his dream to prevent the tragedy of famine? Well, we are about to find out. Famine is at humanity's doorstep because of conflict, because of COVID-19, and because of climate change. Those three trends have created a perfect storm of humanitarian disaster, not in one or just two isolated places, but truly on a global scale. Today, as I speak, 270 million people are marching toward the brink of starvation. That's up from 135 million just a year ago, and I'm not talking about people just going to bed hungry. I'm talking about people marching toward starvation. And within that, over 30 million people in 36 countries will die if they don't continue to get the food support that they receive from the World Food Program that we provide right now. They literally depend on us for their survival. 30 million people. And we support over 100 million people. But here's the tragic reality. Because of COVID and the global economic crisis it has caused, right at the moment when our need for funding is the greatest, our access to traditional government funds are the least. So we must turn to the private sector instead. And we're asking you to be a part of helping us save humanity. We have this brief window of opportunity to prevent a devastating global famine before it closes its grip around the throats of millions of people around the world. The price tag for just famine relief alone is $5 billion. but the return on the investment is beyond huge. Millions of lives saved, thousands of forced migrations stopped so people can stay home, dozens of nations and regions that will not be destabilized but remain orderly. We know that hunger breeds conflict and destabilization, which in turn breeds extremism and forced migration. It's a vicious cycle of suffering which keeps on drawing more people in. Today, around 80 million people are living as refugees or internally displaced people after being forced to flee from their homes due to conflict, the highest total since World War II. Innocent children, women, and men who had to leave everything behind and run for their lives. The human and economic costs of this devastation are colossal. Around $333 billion alone just in the year 2019. So, isn't it worth investing $5 billion to prevent such misery and slash the bill? Ultimately, we will all have to pay. I truly believe it's the best bargain you'll ever be offered and the smartest investment you'll ever make. A wise person once said, "The most expensive peace is still cheaper than the cheapest war." It's time for us to do the right thing. If we don't, we will pay a far, far higher price, more wars, more destabilization, more forced migration, and more famines. It doesn't have to be that way. We have the solution. The best vaccine against chaos is food. The Norwegian Nobel Committee recognized that at the World Food Program that we know our work, we have the expertise to tackle this challenge, and we keep our promises. So let's act together today. Let's fulfill Borlaug's 50-year-old challenge and come together as one united humanity and invest so that we can prevent massive famine in our time.